illnesses in pediatrics. Now basically the monsoon related infections that we see is malaria, dengue, leptospira, typhoid, diarrhea and hepatitis. Now if we take monsoon related infections, either we get it through water, ingestion of water, or we get it through mosquitoes, or we get it through walking through water. Now if we go to take mosquito related we get dengue and malaria. Now dengue is caused by a mosquito that bites you during the daytime, okay? Whereas malaria is caused by a mosquito that bites you during the night time. So in fact dengue is the disease of your workplace, whereas malaria is the disease of your home. I got dengue when I was around 6 years back, but I knew that I got it through my hospital because the place that we were working at had a lot of mosquitoes around at that time. So always remember, if you get a bite of a mosquito during daytime, be worried about dengue. Otherwise it's malaria at night time. Both the mosquitoes are different. So dengue mosquito is Aedes aegypti and malaria is Anopheles. It's the female Anopheles. Bite of a female is very dangerous. So never antagonize a female. Okay. So what are the factors associated with increased mosquitoes? Why do we get mosquitoes? Nowadays we find that it's year-round, but over a period of time, especially seasonal, we find in the monsoons the number of mosquitoes do increase. And probably it's the flooding, improper water accumulation that takes place. Quite often it's in the discarded tires and coconut shells. And our climate, tropical climate. Now if you see this image, this is how mosquitoes come. You know, you've got these tires, water keeps on accumulating inside. That's the breeding ground of your mosquito. You've got these improper water storage areas. So that is another cause of debris. In fact, a lot of new construction now in Mumbai. So a lot of debris around the buildings which accumulates water. So that is another cause. And plus we've got these air conditioners. Every unit, air conditioner unit, every building has so many air conditioner units that tend to give out water, and that may accumulate somewhere. Either you put a pot below it or it drains out into the soil, but that is one of the cause of, in fact they found that if buildings are built like this, chances of dengue is much higher. This is one of the reasons where you can see so many mosquitoes breeding, and they are the ones that actually transmit the virus or the parasite. Now dengue. We are in a belt of dengue. If you see this WHO chart, we are in a belt where we are high prevalent for dengue. So no matter what we do, our climate is such that makes us at a risk factor for dengue. So we say it's only non-sanitation that causes dengue. No, that's not the thing. A country like Singapore, which has marvelous sanitation system, marvelous drainage system, they still tend to get epidemic of dengue every few years. In Mumbai, we've got all viruses. Dengue, there are 4 types of viruses of dengue and lots of subtypes. So usually in a country, it's 1 or 2 viruses that are circulating at a given time. In India, we have all 4 viruses now circulating at any given time. So that's the reason why dengue is, we don't see a seasonal yearly epidemic, we see every year. We don't see every 2 or 3 years. So that's the problem that we are seeing. Now dengue is a virus. Okay, so no antibiotic is going to work here. There are 4 types of dengue viruses, of which dengue type 2 is the most dangerous one. Your dengue type 2 is the one that actually affects the liver. So we all know that dengue, usually when patient comes with dengue, he comes to you as fever. He'll come to you with pains, bone pains, the bone breaking pain. It's called as a bone breaking pain, and I myself have suffered from it. This pain is really terrible. So bone breaking pain, that's the kind of pain when you get, you realize it's dengue. So fever with bone pains, then the child may have kind of hypovolemia. He's not vomiting, he's not getting diarrhea, but still this child looks dehydrated. So hypovolemia. When you see a child with poor pulses, fever, but no diarrhea, vomiting, think of dengue. Okay? First time you get a dengue, it's going to be like any other viral infection. It's going to be fever. You won't be able to find out whether this is dengue or not. It's the second time that you get dengue. That is the thing that is worrisome. Why Because we've already developed antibodies to the first virus. Because we have got antibodies to the first virus, the second virus, when it comes, the body recognizes it partially. And it's the body's immune system that is causing the problem. So dengue is actually a disease. A bad kind of dengue is actually a disease of people who have good immunity. Okay, so most of the times you would find dengue doesn't occur in malnourished children. Severe dengue. Okay, but dengue definitely occurs in children who are good immunity. Because if I have the first time I got dengue, it will be like any fever. Second time when I get dengue, it's my immune response that's causing the problem. So in a way, it's a matter of good immunity that is causing the problem. So what I put it on the slide also is that first infection leads to non-specific fever, and it's the second infection that leads to the severe infection. And the severe infection is in the form of serositis, hypotension, shock. Now treatment of dengue is actually symptomatic. You only give paracetamol. Don't use aspirin with dengue. And most important is when you see them in your practice, advise them to drink a lot of water. Okay? Because our treatment, even on a hospital base, our treatment is basically to give them intravenous fluids so that they don't get hypotensive. That's the treatment of dengue. So your advice should be to drink a lot of water. Okay, so that's the advice. Now what's the warning sign? When are you going to send them to a hospital? Warning signs if the child is persistently vomiting, not able to take anything orally. You find the peripheral pulses are poor. You take a blood pressure, you find that the child is hypertensive. You always ask them how much is the urine output. Is the urine less or is the urine becoming more darker in color? Then you send the child to the hospital. And anytime the child has jaundice, send him to the hospital. Okay, so these are your warning signs. These are the signs where you're going to send these children to the hospital. Treatment in hospital is also going to be similar, except that these patients will go on intravenous fluids. Now similarly, if we take malaria, okay, now malaria is also mosquito borne, and malaria is caused by female Anopheles. It's a parasite. Dengue was a virus, so virus had an immunological phenomenon. Now this parasite, what it does in your body is, it affects the red blood cells and it causes lysis of the red blood cells by the spleen. So if I have malaria and if the red blood cells are getting destroyed, my first presentation is going to be anemia. Okay, but for anemia to develop, that is the hemoglobin to drop so significantly, the red blood cells should be destroyed very fast. So for destruction of red blood cells to occur so fast, the malaria has to be a dangerous kind of malaria, which is your falciparum malaria. So when we talk about severe malaria, it's usually falciparum. Vivax takes time. Vivax does not give you such kind of severe manifestations so fast. Nowadays we are seeing a mutated variety of Vivax which is appearing like falciparum. The problem with falciparum is that it affects all stages of RBCs, the young RBCs, the old RBCs, so the entire life span of the RBC is getting affected, and that's the reason falciparum is so dangerous. Okay, because it destroys all stages of RBCs immediately. And the other problem with falciparum is that it clogs the microvasculature, so it causes microthrombin. So it can cause infarcts. It can cause infarcts in your brain, it can cause infarcts into your other organs. So that's how your presentation of cerebral malaria works. Cerebral malaria is basically small micro-infarcts in the cerebellum. So severe malaria, when you suspect, if a child has convulsion or if a child has altered sensorium, so brain involvement. Then vital organs getting involved, thrombi into the vital organs, so liver. So if liver is getting involved, jaundice. Kidney is getting involved, decreased urine output. Because this child can get such severe malaria, they may come to you as severely acidotic, severely septic looking child, lactic acidosis. Because RBCs are getting destroyed, the glucose turnover is very fast, so hypoglycemia. So these are your signs of severe malaria. Now whenever you get severe malaria, you have to immediately rush the child to the hospital because this can be fatal in a matter of hours. Remember, falciparum can lead to death in a matter of hours. So you need to get this child to the hospital as soon as possible. Vivax malaria is not that fatal. Now the malaria belt, you can see the malaria belt is again in the tropical area. But this time Africa is majorly affected with malaria. Now there is a difference between people who come from Africa and people who get malaria in India. In Africa, malaria is year round. Okay, in India it's seasonal. So in Africa, malaria tends to affect children maximum because by the time they are adults, they are actually developed antibodies. Whereas in India, because it's seasonal, a lot of adults don't have antibodies to malaria. So in India, you could get malaria in children, you could get malaria in adults. Okay, now I'm talking about severe kind of malaria. So that's the difference. So if you could have a lot of relatives coming from Africa, or you could have people coming from Africa. So don't think that malaria will occur only in this season in Africa. It can occur year long. So any child who returns back from Africa, fever, think of malaria any time of the year. But any child goes from India to say Europe, think of malaria if he's gone in this season. Okay, not otherwise. So in India it's usually seasonal, in Africa it occurs year round. Now when we talk about fever with chills, that's the classical presentation of malaria. Okay, fever with chills. Now this would occur usually if you take the malarial cycle, the trophozoites that are present in the RBCs, they tend to lyse every 48 hours. Then as they multiply, the cycle becomes 24 hours. Then as they multiply, the cycle tends to become every 12 hours, then every 6 hours. So if somebody tells me this child is having continuous fever, it's probably not malaria. If somebody tells me this child is getting fever which comes down but then again comes up, probably it's malaria. Okay, but then malaria would have started with maybe fever once in 2 days, then fever once in a day, then fever 12 hours. Okay, so rather than chills, you take into incidence about how the fever is progressing from intermittent fever to going on to become continuous. That's the kind of malaria presentation. Now treatment of malaria. We all know about various kind of anti-malarials. I'm going to come to the anti-malarials. If I'm treating non-severe malaria, even if the child has thrombocytopenia on a CBC, I would give it only for 3 days. Whereas if I'm treating any kind of severe malaria, my treatment is for 7 days. Okay, and if I'm treating Vivax, I need to give Primartin. Because Vivax tends to have a store in the liver. So you have these parasites, the hypnozoites that remain in the liver and can cause relapses. So I have seen a lot of children where they've not been, in fact a lot of adults where they've not been treated with Primartin and then they've had a relapse of malaria on and on and on. Now when you talk about mosquitoes, we need to make sure that we also advise the parents about how to prevent the mosquitoes. We talk about mosquito mats and coils. Can anyone tell me how to advise them how to use the coils or the mats? Are they supposed to put them on a closed room? Are they supposed to keep it with windows open? How long can they use the same mat? Does anyone, we all use it, so how do we use it? So whenever you start the mosquito mat, you put it into the socket. First close the room. For half an hour it should be closed. Then you can open the windows and keep the windows open. Okay, so it's the other way around. And you can't use...
At night?
At night you may keep it open. Yeah, you cannot sleep. What does it contain? Yeah, so you don't want to inhale that. So you don't want to inhale that, that's why keep the windows open. So first when you ignite it before twilight, light it up. Your maximum mosquitoes come at the time of twilight. So before twilight, light it up, half an hour, close the room, open the room, and then you can stay in the room. So you stay with the windows open. But then if you stay with the windows open, the mosquitoes are brighter than us. They'll come inside. So you need mosquito nets. Okay, so you need the mosquito nets. Now this is what the government should be doing, is spraying DET. Which they do. You suddenly see that white colored smoke coming everywhere whenever you complain. And you should be using mosquito nets, not like this but probably on the window. Now among the mosquito repellents, what do you advise? A lot of children go downstairs in the evening to play. What are you going to advise them?
Some of them are
mosquito repellent patches.
Patches. How do those patches work?
You release, I think it's pyrin.
There are two kinds of mosquito repellents available. One is DEET and the other is citronella oil. DEET is what has been used frequently in children, and it is supposed to be the most competent mosquito repellent for children. However, there are certain precautions while applying DEET. It should not be applied over cuts, wounds or irritated skin. It should not be applied on the face. You should apply it only over the exposed skin area. And protection with DEET is supposed to last for 6 hours. Citronella oil is actually the essential oil of lemongrass. Based on a meta-analysis of studies which was done in the year 2011, it has been found that combination of citronella oil and vanillin can give you a mosquito repellent activity for around 3 hours. And for Anopheles and Culex mosquitoes, it's almost similar to DEET. So these are the two kind of repellents that are available and which can be used in children.
Now, clinical features, common clinical features of dengue. Why I have kept this frog here is just remember that the frog is drowning in the water. Similarly in dengue, we are drowning because of third spacing. This child has serositis, so pleural effusion, ascites. Fever, body pain, thrombocytopenia, deranged liver enzyme vomiting is similar. Blue thing is similar for everything. Most important is third spacing. That is important for dengue. Whereas malaria, fever, body pain, thrombocytopenia, vomiting, deranged liver enzyme, similar. Splenomegaly you will see with Vivax because Vivax gives you time for the spleen to enlarge. Falciparum doesn't give you the time. Most important is anemia. So now which test to do when? He talked about dengue NS1 antigen. Child comes to you with fever on day 1, antibodies you may not get. Okay, and I told you dengue, severe dengue is because of immune reaction. So I may not actually get dengue IgM positive ever in my test. So if I have to do a dengue test, first is to do a dengue NS1 antigen, can remain positive for the first 5 days of fever. Beyond 5 days, NS1 will not work. Then I have a dengue IgM, which with a second infection may not rise. So the test that I have is a dengue IgG. But an IgG does not tell me past infection, current infection. Rising titer after 2 weeks, too late to diagnose dengue. So I have a dengue IgG quantitative test, which tells me a cutoff. So if I have a dengue IgG less than 40, probably past infection. If I have a dengue IgG, probably more than 40, recent infection. So if I have to diagnose dengue, ideal test to do NS1 antigen first 5 days. After 5 days, both IgM, IgG. If IgM positive, definitely current infection. If IgM negative but IgG titer very high, again current infection. If IgG titer low, IgM negative, not dengue. It's only because of the cost that we don't end up doing IgG. Now malaria, which test to do? We all do peripheral smear, but peripheral smear ideally should be done at the height of fever. Otherwise it could be negative. You have these rapid malaria tests, which there are various kits that are available. Optimal is the one that we are currently using because it helps you to diagnose between Vivax and falciparum, whereas your parasite F can only diagnose your falciparum malaria. So Optimal helps you to do, you could do it yourself, you don't need any expertise to read the slide or anything. It's bedside. Only thing is you need to keep a kit and it should not get expired because it's got a short expiry shelf life. And I'm going to end it over here.